to educate the population for the purpose of, right, thus it's better to, what I said, in attempting to regulate the population, since its relation to water contamination requires further empirical verification. Thus, it is certainly more practical to educate the population for the purpose of B, regulating their behavior, since water contamination is directly influenced by how people dispose of waste. What does that mean? To try and get to decontamination or the preservation of the quality of water by regulating the population is so much more indirect. It requires so many more factors and resources than a more direct means, and there's probably better means than this as well, than a more direct means of educating the population to properly dispose of waste. Here's how water gets contaminated. It's behavioral, right? I ultimately feel that the correlation, this is on a side note, I ultimately feel that no matter what the scientists find, I really don't care, personally, but it's not sheer magnitude of people. That's a problem, right? I don't think that is, for quantity, yes, that's undeniable fact. For quality, because of groundwater pumping, but as far as quality, no, not really. There isn't that correlation with respect to sheer magnitude and quality, though there is with sheer magnitude and quantity of water left. But quality is behavioral. Like you take your batteries, you leave it outside, you leave cars outside to rust, you throw, bleach wherever, whatever, right? And it's a pretty easy way to secure that. EPA people put together some pamphlet, they have a, thing in the schools that they introduce to the kids, and the kids shame their parents while they're driving cars. Hey, Mom, Dad, you're not supposed to do that because it's going to contaminate the groundwater supply, and we need that for our generations so that we can drink. And there you go. Now you got clean water, right? It's the remaining water that you have is clean. Because you should see the alternative. If populations continue to grow, and they will, to 400, 500 million in the States in the next coming years, right? Maybe, a couple, I don't know how many years it would take to reach 500 million, but I think we're around 350 now in the US. But, 500 million people, almost double the amount of people that we have now, that's a whole lot of people. We know that the sheer magnitude of the people is going to put a strain on available water, but the idea is it doesn't necessarily have to be the case that it puts that contamination becomes a problem. Why? Because we can change that. We have an ability to influence that. We don't have an ability to influence the amount of water that's left, but we do have a direct ability to influence the quality of the water that's left. And how do we go about doing that? In sort of an environmental sense, we have to give them a different alternative. That alternative is a regulation of the behavior. Let's educate the people so that they know how to use water. And that's pretty, what's not persuasive about that? To say no to that is sort of irrational. No, we don't want to learn about keeping the water clean because it doesn't matter. Are you serious? How did you, okay, well, on what merit? Right? I don't understand. Like a flat denial of this is just illogical. Right? You have to do this, right? This is an imperative. This is where the ethics folks need to jump in. So, let me read the final bit. This is it for the last little section. In attempts to decrease the consumption of pollution in our water supplies, either we attempt to regulate population growth or we attempt to regulate their behavior. Since we recognize that the increased population will affect both the levels of available water and possibly the level of contamination within those waters. Since the strength of the correlation connecting increased population growth with increased water pollution is itself requires further empirical verification, as noted by those dudes claim that, quote, the net effect on the risk of water quality impairment is uncertain, one would not be justified in attempting to regulate population growth since its relation to water contamination requires further empirical verification. Thus, it is certainly more practical to educate the population for the purpose of regulating its behavior, since water contamination is directly influenced by how people dispose of waste. That would be the end of it, right? And now I'm like, yes, I'm almost done with this series. The series was hella hard to put together. It was a brain drain not a brain drain, but a brain strain So stylistically, this feels good to me. Partly because I'm exhausted from the series. It took a lot of brain power to put this intuitive process into something that could be taught. It was tremendously difficult to put this together. But now that it's together, I would say my favorite series is probably, I love Nietzsche a lot, but I think my favorite series is Semiotics, and this might be my Semiotics series. This might be my new favorite lecture series. I know it's weird to say what my own favorite series is, but I think this might be my new series, and then maybe Semiotics after, and then maybe Nietzsche third. But this feels good to me, right? I don't feel like I need to arbitrarily add more content information, even for the purposes of pedagogy, and so I will conclude the explanation of DS here. I could flesh it out, I could add more, but it just, when I read that, I was like, no, that sounds good, right? It's persuasive, it's logical, it's rigorous, it's conceptually solid. Anybody who's going to deny the fact that we shouldn't educate people to keep water clean, then you're just like, you're not rational. Or show me in my reasoning why we shouldn't educate people to keep water clean. I mean, sure, there might be some weakness in the argument. Please show me where that exists and why we shouldn't care about the environment. I'm waiting to hear that argument. I'm so waiting to hear that argument. We satisfied each of the conditions for the disjunctive syllogism. We justified our denial. The environment is important, that's what I'm saying. We satisfied... We satisfied each of the conditions for the disjunctive syllogism. We justified our denial for the first disjunct by internally legitimizing the logic and maintaining consistency. And I hope you noticed we tagged on the last bit about educating the population, which obviously conforms to the last rule of logical inference. Yay! Conjunction. Right? That last bit about education obviously was an implication from the appropriation of disjunctive syllogism, and I just tagged this little bit about education because the question is going to be, well, how do you change the behavior? We recognize this, either you do this or you change the behavior. So the conclusion is we need to change the behavior. The question is, how do you change the behavior? You change the behavior through education. That bit about changing it through education is after the conclusion of the disjunctive. You guys know this, we've been doing this nonstop. It's an implication from the disjunctive syllogism. It's about education. But the beauty of this is the last step is conjunction. All that you need to do with conjunction is just add something new. And we did. We added this bit on education. So actually we did both conjunction and disjunctive syllogism in section 4. Conjunction is super easy. I just added that last little bit on education, and it satisfied the condition. So we've used all 5 rules of inference in this. So we tagged on the last bit about educating the population, which obviously conforms to the last logical inference, which is conjunction. The conjunction is simple. Just add a claim. It really is just that. Just add a claim. If you need to justify it, justify it. If you need to defend it, defend it. You got these tools now. You should know how to do that. But you're really just adding a claim. We did. It was educate yourself about proper waste disposal. The following brief essay is the product of the logic. Peace. So now, with the last few minutes that I have, this is the goal. It's not the greatest essay ever written, trust me. In terms of the stuff that I produce, it's not the greatest. But I want you this is like the gem that I wanted to leave at the end of the series. And to me, this might not mean much to you. And I know most people just won't get it. That this whole freaking, I don't know how many hours this is going to be. Probably 6 hours, maybe. It's got to be at least 6 hours. But the 6 to 8 hour lecture series was to create basically a 2-page paper. Like, yeah, it's basically a 2 and a little bit. All of this work was for a 2-page paper? You guys are crazy. You guys spent all this time watching this dude talk about all of this crap so that you could write a 2-page paper? I mean, that's overkill, dude. Like, you spent 8 hours to tell me how to write a 2-page paper. And it is my crowning achievement. It is the pinnacle of all madness. Yeah, we spent all this time to write 2 pages, dude. This is what I was waiting for, right? So, I'm not gonna read it. It wouldn't make sense to read it, right? We built this paper. You can go back and look at each section now and see what. Oh, that's when we used this